Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Odds Bodkins Curiosity Shoppe. I am your shopkeeper, Chris Baker, and today a very interesting item. This is an item we'll find off the shelves, designated for man's inhumanity towards man. So without further ado, let's pull out the kinetoscope and take a look at the new film, Speak No Evil. So, Speak No Evil is the remake of a Danish film, actually entitled The Guess, but in the United States, where they released it, they changed it to Speak No Evil. Of course, you can catch it, I know it's on Shudder, because that's where I watched it back in 2022. I believe AMC Plus, you can also see it there. But it was a film, this Danish film, I wanted to like it more than I did when I initially watched it. And it's a movie that I appreciated it more as time went on. And it's now a movie I actually quite enjoy. I enjoy what they tried to do with it. It was a bit of a slow burn. And by slow, in this Danish version, it was very slow. And I think the more I understood what they were trying to do with this and understood the psychological nature of this and the shocking ending. I mean, this movie, and we'll talk about that ending once we get into some spoiler territory, but it was, it's one of those movies that kind of grew on me over the past couple years. And when I found out that they were doing an American remake, I thought, oh no, because it's rather dubious when you get some of these great foreign horror films, especially foreign horror films that come from like the Netherlands and that region of Europe. I find that I've really loved some of these movies that come out of there. And when they try to do an Americanized version of it, I don't enjoy it. Case in point, Let the Right One In. Absolutely freaking love that movie. And then they did the Americanized version, Let Me In, and it was okay. I just didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it like I enjoy Let the Right One In. I can keep watching that. I can watch that over and over again. Brilliant film. And the Americanized version just felt Americanized, and it wasn't as good as the original. Even though it had some good young actors at the time, I just didn't care for that. Goodnight Mommy is another film where, the foreign film is much better than the American remake. Not to say that didn't have good actors in it. Naomi Watts and the Corvetti kids, I should say. There's both of them in this. I really enjoyed them as actors in this. I just thought the screenplay wasn't as good as the original, and they tried to change things that didn't need to be changed. And I really didn't enjoy the American version of that film. No, that's not to say that there aren't other foreign films, foreign horror films that do American remakes that I don't enjoy the remake just as much. Like The Ring, I like the American version of that right off the top of my head. But for the most part, I really do enjoy the originals much more than these new Americanized remakes. And I was afraid that's what we were going to get with Speak No Evil. Then I found out James McAvoy was going to be in it, and a lot of the other actors in this I know and really enjoy. So I wasn't sure what I was going to get with this. I went into this. I remember telling my wife before I left for the movie theater, I was like, I really hope I like this movie. I was just afraid it was going to disappoint me. I was afraid it was going to be, for as much as I didn't like the original 2022 Speak No Evil, it grew on me, and it got to a point where I appreciated it enough that I didn't want to see a bastardized American version. And I was afraid that was a possibility. Even though the trailers looked pretty good, there were some aspects of the trailers I was like, I don't remember any explosions in that movie. Please don't tell me we're going to have big chase scenes and explosions and just that, like I said, that Hollywood bastardization of really great ideas that some of these foreign filmmakers come up with. And I will say, before we get into the spoiler territory, I was pleasantly surprised. I really enjoyed this. I thought from an acting standpoint, from a faithfulness standpoint, I mean, this movie, except in a couple areas, and the ending wasn't faithful to the original, but I actually kind of enjoyed the ending that they gave this movie. Not more or less than the other one. It's just different, but shocking in a different way. But for the most part, this movie is terribly faithful to the original 2022 film. And I appreciated that. I appreciated that you had filmmakers making this movie, paying homage to a really good foreign film. James Watkins did a really good job in that regard. So that's all I'm going to say about it before we get into some spoiler territory. I don't want to spend too much time without being able to really feel free to talk about this. So if you haven't watched the new adaptation of Speak No Evil, go check it out in theaters. I think you'll enjoy it. It definitely is a slow burn. It is definitely one of those Blumhouse films. Blumhouse can be kind of hit or miss when it comes to horror, and I think they really hit this one out of the park. And really enjoyed this new adaptation of that 2022 foreign film. And I encourage you to go check it out. If you like horror, if you like slow burn, if you like psychological horror, this really is a good movie. If you like the original, I think you're going to enjoy this. And the ending, like I said, while it is different, it's still just as, maybe not just as shocking, but it's still like, oh shit, I didn't see that coming. So go check it out, and we're going to get into some spoiler territory right now. So one of the things, I think probably one of my chief complaints about this film, even going back to the 2022 Danish film, is that this is a movie where the characters, supposed to be the protagonists, make the worst decisions possible. They make ridiculous decisions. And I loved how they went into that with this new film. Because this is a movie that's the whole point of this, is how we are as a society and how we're afraid to stand up for ourselves and stand up for what we believe in and say no, and we're too polite and too nice, and we put up a shit that we'll sit there in the comfort of our own homes behind closed and locked doors that we wouldn't put up with this shit, but when it's out in public and there's people and pressure and manipulation, we fold and cave, and we allow things around us that we normally wouldn't, but we're just trying to get along. And that's one of the things I appreciate, is that they continued that sentiment. They really didn't try to change the whole point of this movie. And I have to say, I mean, outside of the fact that that is the point of the movie, where you have characters, you have our main characters in this film, Ben and Louise, making decisions based on, trying not to offend people. And then when the veneer comes off the other couple in this movie, Patty and his wife, they still stick around. They don't leave. They try to leave, but then there's excuses why they have to keep coming back to this place, to these people that they know aren't right, to a situation that they know isn't right. And I know a lot of people complain about that. And you get that in a lot of horror movies. You get characters making stupid decisions and making choices that we as an audience member are like, no, don't do that. Why are you doing that? Why are you going back for a stupid stuffed rabbit? But you have to keep in mind two things when you're watching this movie. Is one, that is the point. That is the point of this, is that, these people are making stupid decisions because they're just, too naive to the evils of the world. They're too naive to the social niceties that are expected of people. And the second thing is that, we're going to this psychological thriller horror movie knowing that this is a psychological thriller horror movie. The people in the movie don't know that they're in a horror movie. That's one of the chief complaints, where you have to have a modicum of suspension of disbelief when you go into any horror movie, and most movies in general, is that the people in the movie, especially horror movies, don't know that they're in a horror movie unless you're in the fucking Scream movie. And, Scream movie, everything's meta, and we all know the horror rules and all that bullshit. In real life, when you're going down into that dark basement, this is the real world. You know that there isn't going to be some sort of monster that came in through a portal from the fifth dimension and is ready to rip your soul from your body. You know that's not real. You know you're just going into a dark basement, and whatever fears that you have are the fears that, are manifest by, that fear of the unknown. You know that. You know that's real. People in horror movies are a representation of you in the real world, and they don't know it's real until it's there and it's ripping their throat out. So that's one of the things that I find that when I'm listening to reviews on this or listening to people talk about this movie, that, you have to keep that in mind, that the people in the movie don't know they're in a horror movie. And two, that is the point of this movie, is that people make stupid decisions. They put themselves in harm's way because they're just trying to be nice. And that's one of the things I loved about the original movie. I loved the commentary of it. I just thought in the original movie, it seemed to take a long time to get there. And there are certain points where, it's stupid decision after stupid decision. And when you finally realize that these people aren't what they seem, and I really need to get the F out of Dodge, get my family the F out of Dodge, they don't do that. So it does get frustrating. And from a viewing standpoint, I get that frustration, but that, like I said, that is kind of the point of this movie. I also liked that this is a look at manhood, and I think this movie really exemplified that. Not that the original 2022 Speak No Evil didn't, because it did, but I think this kind of amped it up because it put it, manhood in a very American way, where you have, and I know James McAvoy is British, and that this takes place in Britain, but from a Hollywood standpoint, they made, James McAvoy definitely is the alpha male, the cowboy, the guy that's gonna, whack his kid on the ass and grab his wife's ass and look at some other girl's tits. It's that kind of stereotypical American alpha male, where you have the Ben character played by Scoot McNairy. He is more of kind of like the modern man who's very, I don't want to say passive, but yeah, passive. And, just, everybody get along. And, we don't want to make these people upset because that'll hurt their feelings. And, my daughter's almost 12 years old and running around with a stuffed animal and she needs to grow the fuck up. But, because my wife says so, because I don't have a backbone, we're just going to let it happen. And, let these people that have manipulate them into coming to this remote house of theirs, and let them manipulate them into staying and just put up with all the passive aggressive behavior that you get from these people that are supposed to be your new friends, but they don't seem very friendly sometime. That scene where Ben's wife is a vegetarian and James McAvoy's character Patty is essentially forcing her to eat was a roast goose or duck or something. I think it's goose, and doesn't say a fucking word because he doesn't want his new buddy, his new friend to think bad of him. And, it's just all in good fun. He's making his wife compromise her principles, whether you agree with him or not, and he doesn't say a fucking thing. And that is the point of this movie. It's a treatise on manhood, where you have this alpha male douchebag, passive aggressive manipulator in James McAvoy's Patty, who is the obvious bad guy in this. But then you have the Ben character, or Bjorn in the in the Danish film, but you have the Ben character being this milquetoast, passive pussy. And while he is the protagonist of this film, one of the protagonists in this film, he's still not a likable guy because he's not standing up for himself. He's not standing up for his family. He's not protecting himself or his family. Most importantly, his family, his daughter and his wife. It's a situation even within their marriage. His wife is sexting some other dude and he just bottles it up and holds resentment, and they don't talk about it. And she's very much almost kind of the modern woman, where she's, wearing the pants in the family and she's calling the shots, and and he doesn't really have much say in anything. And that's not to say that he needs to stand up to her, but, with any good relationship, there has to be even ground. There has to be compromise. There has to be working through things and talking about things, and both parents being invested in the rules for the kids, and not just one person making all the rules and the other person, fuck you, what you think, we're doing it my way. And there is a lot of interesting aspects that they go down with this relationship between Ben and Louise. So a lot of really interesting themes in this. And like I said, it is definitely a slow burn of a film, but I liked how in the original movie, it was a slow burn and it felt like a slow burn. This was a slow burn, but it felt like it amped up the intensity of the slow burn. And that, I have to say, is all on James McAvoy. James McAvoy plays a simmering crazy better than most people. I mean, he always plays, good guys and, decent characters, when he was in Wanted, playing Professor X in the X-Men movies. He plays good guys, but then you watch a movie like Split, and the crazy of that character, and of course in Glass, and I really felt like this is one of his great performances in that regard, in playing that low level simmering crazy, and then the boiling over crazy that you get towards the end of it, almost like a Jack Nicholson playing Jack Torrance in The Shining level of crazy in that final showdown in The Shining. And like I said, this movie is pretty faithful to the 2022. I mean, there are some scenes that maybe it's not shot for shot, but there are definitely a lot of scenes like, oh, I remember that from the 2022 film, like the scene where Ben and Patty are off. It's a different setting because it's they're different countries, but they're both like screaming out into the wilderness, into nothing, releasing that primal energy. And, I was like, that's right from the 2022 film. And there were a lot of scenes like that. But I think one of the biggest differences of this film, and like I said, we're in spoiler territory, and that's spoilers for this film, and it's spoilers for the 2022 film. So I'm giving you one last shot if you don't want spoilers for anything. But the reveal of the intent of Patty and his wife is revealed a little different in this. And I almost like this because it gives the little boy that is posing as Patty, and I can never remember. I just watched the movie hours ago, and I can't remember if it's Kiara, something like that. Kiara, I believe is her name. I can't remember. But at any rate, we'll talk about the actress here in a little bit. But it gives that little boy, his name's Abel in the 2022 film. It's more of a nickname, Ant. In this film, he's got his tongue cut out, and he can't speak, but it gives that character a little more agency in this movie that I don't feel the character had in the 2022 film. I think the character in this story, I think, is an interesting character, and we don't get much from that character's perspective outside of a few scenes here and there. But you didn't really get a lot out of that character, I don't feel. And it's been a couple years since I watched the 2022 film. But I felt this movie did a better job of making this character an active participant in the story, and not just there as kind of a set piece, as a bit of window dressing for what's to come. And I liked how, instead of having Ben, or Bjorn as he's called in the original film, just coming across a cabin with all the suitcases and all the photographs of the people that they've done this to before, I liked how it was, and showing the little girl Agnes and trying to show her what's going to happen to her, and like the kids actively trying to save her from a fate that he knows is going to happen to her, and the fate that's going to happen to him as well. And I liked that. I thought that was probably a better way to do that than in the 2022 film. Now, the climax of the films couldn't be any more different. And I was really going into this like, I hope they keep the 2022 film ending, because that is a bleak ending. You have our main family trying to get away. Their car breaks down and the bad guys show up. The little boy Abel's already dead. They cut off Agnes's tongue. That's going to be their new daughter. And the two parents are stripped down and tossed into a ditch and stoned to death. And it's such a bleak ending and such a downer of an ending. That's one of the things where the movie felt slow and a little too slow burn for me at that time. I didn't appreciate it as much as I do now. The ending was shocking. And I'm like, oh my God. I sat through that movie and I wasn't sure if I was going to be satisfied, when it was all said and done. But the ending of that movie in 2022 really made the slow burn of the rest of the movie kind of worth it. And there again, like I said, I appreciate that more now than I did when I originally watched it 2 years ago. But this movie, I was like, I really hope they keep that. That's such a downer and a bleak and nihilistic ending. It was such a shock. But I'm like, I understand if they'll change it. They'll probably do a Hollywood happy ending, and that's going to suck. But when they got to the ending, they did the Hollywood happy ending. When the Kiara character falls off the roof and dies, I'm like, oh, well, they're not doing the ending from the original movie. So I was like, okay, now what are they going to do? Is it going to be just the sappy, happy Hollywood ending? The bad guys are killed and the good guys get away. And they did that. But it was interesting as James McAvoy's character, Patty, is laying on the ground paralyzed because he got stabbed with a sedative that he was going to give to Agnes before he cut her tongue out. She ended up stabbing him with that, essentially paralyzing him. And Scoot McNairy's character was going to blow his head off. And I thought, oh, this is going to be brutal. He's finally going to get his balls. And then he just walks off. He's not going to change who he is. And I got to respect that because he manned up enough in this movie to say he learned the lesson from being a big pushover. But then you have the little kid, Ant, in the original movie is drowned. And they paid homage to that, but he ends up surviving. But in this, Ant walks by and this man that tortured him, cut his tongue out, killed his parents, abused him for God knows how long, and was going to do it all over again with some other kid, with Agnes, this little girl that he come to be friends with, straddles him and bashes his head in with a fucking brick. And I'm like, holy shit. And I really like the practical effect they used. They cut away real quick because you could tell it was a dummy head that was being bashed in, but it was there quick enough that it added some gore and added like that disturbing factor. And then the end of the movie, they're driving off and it's all quiet except for some sound effects, maybe a little droning, atmospheric score underneath. But you see them driving away and the little girl giving her worry rabbit or whatever it's called that she uses for her anxiety. She gives it to the kid and the camera close-ups on the kid and the tears welling up in his eyes. I got fucking chills at that part, and it almost made me well up and cry because it gave this character, Ant in this movie, Abel in the other movie, it gave this character like I said, the agency that he needed and it's a sweet little kid. He didn't deserve what he got in the 2022 film. It added to the horror of it all, but to see this character get his revenge, because it really is a story about Ben and Louise and Agnes, but it's also his story as well. They've just been tortured by this family for a couple days. He's been tortured with them for, I would have to imagine, a year, maybe more. And to see this little kid get the revenge he deserved, to me, was satisfying. It totally made the ending different from the 2022 film, which I absolutely loved that ending. But this ending was just as good, just as shocking and jarring in a different way. But it gave you the more hopeful ending, that Hollywood happy ending, but it wasn't without consequence. And I really appreciated that they did change the ending. I wanted the original ending in this, but when I didn't get it, I was really happy and satisfied with the ending that I did get. And I thought this movie was well acted. James McAvoy was tour de force in this. Freaking great. Aisling Franciosi plays Chiara. She is fabulous. She played in that movie Stop Motion that came out on Shudder here, a couple months ago. I really enjoyed her as that. Scoot McNairy was really good as Ben. Mackenzie Davis was fantastic as Louise. I thought the little girl, Alex West Leffler, as Agnes, did a really good job. And as much as James McAvoy really was the star of this show, I have to say, for my money, the little kid that played Ant, Dan Huff, he really stole it from me because this kid had to do a lot of really good acting without any dialogue. It was just a lot of grunts and moans and him trying to say something without a tongue and a lot of facial expression and his eyes welling up at the very end. I don't know if that was digitally done or if he could really make those crocodile tears roll like that, but it worked, whatever it was. However they got that crying out of him or those tears welling up out of him, it worked, and he really did a fantastic job with this role of Ant. And like I said, where the kid didn't feel like it had much agency and just kind of felt like a prop in that first movie in 2022, Dan Huff as Ant in this really felt like he had agency, really felt like he had a purpose, and I really enjoyed what they did with that character. And of course, from a cinematic standpoint, I thought this was well written. James Watkins wrote the screenplay for this as well as directing. A director I'm not terribly familiar with. I mean, he did the Descent Part 2. He wrote that, and he was a second unit director, but I never watched that one. He's done a couple other movies. He did directed an episode of Black Mirror from back in 2016, but I'm not terribly familiar with him. But after this, I want to see more from this guy because I thought he did a really good job from a screenplay standpoint. It changed the movie enough to make it feel like you're watching something a little different from the 2022 film, but still paid enough homage to that 2022 film to feel like I was watching a really excellent adaptation or remake of that film. So he did a great job with that. There was a lot of really good scenes, a lot of interesting camera angles that I thought added to the creepiness. And this movie definitely was one of those, like I said, slow burn horror thrillers, very psychological, but it also was full of atmosphere, and it really captured the creepy, unnerving atmosphere that you got out of that 2022 film that made me appreciate it so much after the fact. And this I appreciated it from Jump Street because I thought he did a really good job of creating that air of unease where you have these people that they seem nice enough, you've become fast friends with them enough, but there's just something just off about them. And it's easy to kind of put that on the back burner and say, oh, it's just me overthinking this. But, down in your heart of hearts, something's not quite right. And he did a really good job with these characters, and in that vein, creating that sort of atmosphere with this movie as a whole. And I love the soundtrack as well. I mean, it had a really good score to it, but there were some needle drops. They had Def Leppard Animal, which I freaking love. You add some hair metal to anything, and you've got me on board. And the Bangles Eternal Flame, I was not expecting that in that. It was in the movie. It was in the end credits. Now I've had Eternal Flame stuck in my head all afternoon leading up to recording this. But I really enjoyed that as well. So that's it. That's my thoughts on Speak No Evil. It's one of those foreign horror films, a Danish film that came out in 2022 that, like I said, didn't enjoy it at first. I thought the ending was really good, but leading up to it was difficult for me, but I gained an appreciation of it over the past couple years. And this is a remake of that I think stands up to it. It's a good remake, and it did things different enough to make this an enjoyable watch and feel like I saw things that I didn't see before. there was a lot of comfortability in the things that I did see from the original movie, but they changed just enough to make this feel like a whole new experience, which I appreciated that. And they did it in all the best ways. It wasn't change for change's sake. It was change, but they kept the shock value that I enjoyed of that first one. So I want to thank everyone for listening to my thoughts on Speak No Evil. You can check it out now in theaters. You can also check it out our podcast on any platform that you happen to listen to, Spotify, Apple, and all the other ones. There's tons of them out there, but whatever you happen to be listening to us on, please like, follow, subscribe to us, leave those reviews, share the podcast with anyone that you know that loves horror, fantasy, and science fiction. And as always, check us out on our socials like Facebook and Instagram. So until next time.